Hi, everybody. I'm Mark Walters of BigFanboy.com, here once again at the Dallas International Film Festival, and it is my great pleasure to be joined by the one and only John Kricfalusi. Thank you so much for being here, first and foremost, to accept the Tex Avery Award. It's very cool to have you in our neck of the woods, and
it's very cool to be in Tex Avery's neck of the woods. So thank you.
Absolutely. I've been a huge fan of your work for many, many years. I actually know Mr. Bakshi. So it's kind of cool to, now that I've known him, now to be able to meet you, and you guys worked so closely together so many years ago. And
yeah.
I'm sure you could tell me some stories.
I spent about 2 hours last night telling Ralph Bakshi stories about the Mighty Mouse show.
Yeah.
And how we got started over at Real Effects, talking to all the animators there.
Do you now especially do you get a chance to kind of when you meet like aspiring and upcoming animators? I mean, obviously, the world has changed so much just in the last, 20, 30 years when it comes to that art form. What are some of the things that you see happening now, maybe that are for the better or for the worse in the world of animation? I know we could probably go 30 minutes on
I'm waiting for it to go back to Tex Avery, to tell you the truth. I'm sort of... I love the past. I love the future. I'm not that crazy about now. Mm-hmm. I don't fit in the present. I don't know why. I never have. Yeah. Even when I was 11 years old, I was kind of a curmudgeon. It's like everything I liked was old movies, old music, just pop culture. I'm totally a pop culture type guy.
Yeah.
But it's pop culture from the 20s to the maybe early 60s.
What was that first moment for you when you realized this is what I want to do? Like, I want to be an animator. From the moment you were born.
I think so.
I watched
as far
the
as I
cartoon,
can remember.
That's what I want to do. That type of thing.
Yeah, I mean, my dad was in the Air Force,
mm-hmm.
So my folks and I were in Germany, stationed in Germany in the 50s, late 50s. So it tells you that I don't remember a heck of a lot about watching TV there. I remember I used to watch the cowboy shows in German, mm-hmm. and I must have watched the cartoons because I was drawing cartoons. According to my mom, I was drawing cartoons like all over the walls and everywhere else, and when I was about 3 or something like that. But my first real memories of taking it seriously, sort of, if you can call a cartoon serious, I was about 8 years old, living in Montreal. We came back to Canada, and actually it was Ottawa. Right after Montreal, came back to Ottawa, and living with my grandmother. We were staying with my grandmother until we found a place. And every day, before school, at lunchtime, and after school, they would run cartoons on the 3 Canadian networks. There was 2 English-speaking networks and 1 French channel, right? So I would sit like right in front of the TV, changing the channels from Huckleberry Hound to Yogi Bear to Quick Draw McGraw to Beanie and Cecil, and going crazy, like because I would switch the channels during the commercials, right?
Yeah.
But then when I came back to the other channel, I'd be like halfway into a cartoon. But I did this. This was a routine I did every day, and right after the cartoons were over, at the end of the day of school, I'd get out all my comic books of the same characters. I had comic books of Huckleberry Hound and Bugs Bunny.
Like
and
Dell and Gold Key stuff?
Yeah,
Yeah.
all that stuff.
Yeah.
And I would just sit there on the floor drawing, and like a million pads and stuff like that. For breakfast, I would have my Kellogg's OKs with Yogi Bear on the cover. I had my Huckleberry Hound bowl. I had a Huck and Yogi spoon, the mug, Yogi mug, the whole thing. There's no way I would eat breakfast without my Huck and Yogi mug and bowl. Mm-hmm. And I had to watch cartoons while I was doing it, and I was just like totally immersed into it.
Well, what was the first moment when you met Ralph? I would imagine that was kind of like really a big immersion into that industry and everything. I mean, he'd been doing it for so many years, but what was that first moment for you? Like when did you guys first kind of come together?
Well, when I first came to LA, I got my first job in the animation business. Was first at a commercial studio named Calico Creations. Later went on to do Dink the Dinosaur, mm-hmm. But at that time they were strictly doing commercials, and I learned a lot there, a lot more than I learned at school, because they would let you work in every job possible. But while I was there, I met a guy named Eddie Fitzgerald, really wacky, brilliant cartoonist, who was working at Filmation, which was at the time the worst cartoon studio that ever existed. Right? They made stuff like the Archies and He-Man and Fat Albert and the Cosby. It was just the cheapest bargain.
Lou Scheimer was the guy.
Scheimer.
Yeah,
Scheimer.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just, they were just in it for the money. Nobody cared about what they were doing or anything. But Eddie told me, I got to quit my job and come over to Filmation to work on, because they were experiencing a golden age. And I'm thinking, golden age at Filmation? What's going on? So it turns out what was happening was they were doing a remake of Mighty Mouse. Mighty Mouse and Heckle and Jekyll. You know, they were doing the crappy Saturday morning version, limited animation version of cartoons that were fully animated 50 years earlier. And I loved Mighty Mouse when I was a kid. So he talked me into this thing, and I shouldn't have done it, but I went over there. I worked for Filmation, and then found out when you work at a TV studio in those days, it was very seasonal. So you work for the summer, basically, until the shows debuted. And then they would be sending all the rest of the work overseas to finish it, and you'd be out of a job. So there I was, out of a job. And it was pretty quick. I was running out of money. So I was trying to figure out, where am I going to work? Where am I going to work? All the TV studios were laying people off at that time. So I saw an ad in the paper, Ralph Bakshi's looking for stuff. And I had up to that time, I had swore, there's no way in hell I'm ever going to work for that Ralph Bakshi, that guy making the X-rated cartoons and all this stuff. And I was all adamant about it. I don't know why. Anyways, I needed a job, so I called him up, or I called the studio up. And it was really naive, too. Like, I called, can I speak to Ralph? I get a secretary or something. And they put me through to his assistant, Lynn Bettner, who told me to bring my portfolio in and leave it for Mr. Bakshi, right? And I was outraged. What? You won't even look at my portfolio while I'm there? But, I was desperate, so I dropped the portfolio off. I got a call back about a week later, and Lynn said, Mr. Bakshi found your work to be superlative and would like to seek an audience with you. Like, if you know Ralph, this kind of language is like, this just doesn't fit, right?
Yeah.
So I went down there. This was about 1980 or 81. And I went down to the studio, and he was just finishing up a feature. I'm trying to figure out, was it American Pop? Might have been, it was either American Pop
Around that time.
or Fire and Ice. I forget
Fire and
the
Ice
order.
was probably more like 83, 84.
Okay, then it was American Pop. But he had this idea that he wanted to make short cartoons, bring them back to the theaters like they used to do with Bugs Bunny and Popeye and stuff. Right? I was all over that. Yeah, okay, cool. So he hired me basically on the spot. They put me in there. Oh, yeah. He had all these sort of story ideas typed up on just like single pieces of paper, and they were all kind of hard to read.
Yeah.
Spelling mistakes and no grammar.
He writes like he
Just
talks.
One long, run-on sentence.
Yeah.
Looking at it, trying to figure it out. And I said, Ralph, he wanted me to help him write scripts. I'm like, Ralph, what? Screw scripts. Let's go back and do it the way they made the old cartoons, with storyboards. And he goes, storyboards? Storyboards? What the fuck is a storyboard? What is that, some Hollywood fake shit? I said, no, that's how they used to write cartoons with the pictures, like comic books. You like comics, don't you, Ralph? And he goes, yeah, I love comics. He goes, all right, I'll give you a chance. And he put me in, the whole studio was filled. Like every office had 3 or 4 animators all crammed in trying to finish this feature, right? So there was no room left over except the giant conference room. So here I am, like this punk kid. And Ralph puts me in the biggest office, and it was not even an office. It was a room like this with a huge conference table. I'm sitting there drawing my little storyboard sketches and stuff. And that was my first job with Ralph. But about a month later, he laid me off, and I guess he wasn't able to sell the whole concept of shorts.
Right.
It just seems like something you can't sell anymore.
Yeah, it's a tough one. Let's talk just quickly about where in the hell did Ren and Stimpy come from? Like, how did you, what was going through your head when you came up with those guys?
Same thing that's going through it right now.
Yeah.
I mean, you know what? I should have brought down my doodle pad, because I'm constantly doodling, and especially, well, not when I used to do it when phones worked. Back, a long time ago, phones used to actually work. You could hear people on them, and that's all they did was you talked on the phone. You didn't use it to watch movies. You didn't use it to go to the bathroom. It's just a phone, right?
Yeah.
So whenever I was talking on the phone, I'd have the phone in one hand, and I'd be just doodling mindlessly with the other hand. So you're not really thinking about what you're doodling. And I used to doodle this retarded cat all the time. And the cat was inspired by this Bob Clampett cartoon, one of the first Tweety Bird cartoons, that had these 2 cats in it with these giant bulbous noses with a shine on them. And I was just mesmerized by by the animation and the design of those characters. So I was doodling my own version of it, and it sort of evolved or devolved, whatever you want to call it, into Stimpy. He didn't have a name or anything. It was just a doodle. And this was all happening while I was at Calico Creations.
Mm-hmm.
And a friend of mine there, Joel Fainer, used to hang around all the time. And one day he brought in a postcard that had a really funny photo of a chihuahua with a sweater on, a pink sweater on, standing next to a girl's legs. And I always forget the name of the photographer, but it's a famous photo from the 40s. And we thought this was the funniest photo because it's this psychotic little dog wearing this cute sweater, right? And you know he just wants to tear the sweater off and like kill somebody. So I drew this. I drew my own cartoon version of him, this psychotic chihuahua with a sweater on. And I started drawing more and more, and Joel and I would come up with jokes to go with him. And when he would do the Peter Lorre voice, I'm here to tear your tonsils out. You know, and just do crazy stuff. And one day Joel said, why don't you put him and that retarded cat together? I was like, you know, Eureka! So I did, and I started actually writing, like, you know, actual stories with plots and things like that. And Lynn Naylor and I made these big presentation pieces illustrating the story ideas.
Mm-hmm.
We did storyboards and things like that. And for 9 years, I took it around trying to sell it to people. And you know, during the 80s, people thought you were crazy if you brought an original idea of for a cartoon, because all they bought in the 80s were things that were spin-offs.
Sure.
You know, He-Man was a spin-off of a toy. Strawberry Shortcake was a spin-off of greeting cards. Laverne and Shirley in the Army, which I had worked on, was a spin-off of a live-action team. Nobody came in and said, hey, I have a new character, his name is Bugs Bunny, you know? Because if you did, they would say, well, we can't buy this, no one's ever heard of it.
Yeah.
Which is a crazy theory, but that's what they had in the 80s. So well, it wasn't until Nickelodeon came on and said, we want to buy original cartoon ideas from actual cartoonists,
Mm-hmm.
not from giant corporations like Filmation or Hanna-Barbera or something like that.
Well, now, but did anybody have any? I mean, obviously, there's no way to really know this, but when you look at something like that, I think the instant idea is there's no way that should ever work. But yet, like from the get-go, when I watched it, I was in love with it, you know, immediately. And I think it was because it was so different than what had come before it. But at the same time, there was a lot of like loving nods to what had come before it. Was Nickelodeon nervous at first when they put it on the air? Did they think, oh my God, we don't know if this is going to fly?
They were all, you know, they were all hopeful and they were all supportive of it. Some of them were nervous.
Mm-hmm.
The main executive, Vanessa Coffey, just loved it, and it might not even have gone through had she not really pushed for it. Because the first thing they did was they had me make a pilot. They had, you know, a whole bunch of different people in studios make. Klasky Csupo made a Rugrats pilot. Jim Jenkins made the Doug pilot. Was it Jim Jenkins? Sorry, I don't have a very good memory. But anyways, they made like 8 pilots or something like that, and then they did this focus testing, you know, focus group crap. And then after they tested Big House Blues, which was the Ren and Stimpy pilot,
Mm-hmm.
Vanessa called me up and said, John, I don't know if I have great news for you. We tested the pilot and it didn't do so well. And I was like, I couldn't believe it, to tell you the truth, because they were going to test it with kids, and I thought, well, you know, what kids don't like boogers and you know, and beatings and you know, just crazy stuff happening, right?
Yeah.
And ours was the only crazy cartoon in the whole bunch. So I said, well, what is it that didn't do well? She said, well, there were some categories where it just didn't do well at all. I said, which ones? She said, well, when we asked the kids, what did you think of the editing? They weren't that enthusiastic about it. I said, okay. And then she's, you know, there was all this weird technical stuff. We asked the kids, do you think this is you know, will have a positive effect on society? And they said, no. And I said, well, does that mean that you're not going to do the series? She said, no, you know what, I'm really going to push for this because I love it. And there was one category where you beat the hell out of every other cartoon. And I said, well, which category was that? She said, the kids laughed more at your cartoon than anybody else's. That was the least important category.
Crazy.
But Vanessa, you know, her instinct knew that was probably a good reason to put a cartoon on the air for kids.
Yeah. Well, for one, I'm glad that you did it. We actually have to wrap this up, but I'm going to be with you tomorrow. We're going to be talking with the Real Effects guys. We're going to show the pilot episode of Ren and Stimpy, and we're going to have a nice long chat after that. And I'm really, really looking forward to it. It's one of the great thrills of my career to be able to talk to you. So thank you for coming here.
Thank you, and that's a great
John
show.
Kricfalusi, thank you very much for being part of Dallas International Film Festival.
Thank you.